Welcome again, everyone. And building on what we have learned from Zelesa's work on the music of Africa and global Black music across diaspora, especially from the lens of its influence on the kind of music that are produced on the homeland. Today, we are exploring chapter 10 of Adolfo's work, which is entitled Diasporic Sounds, Afrosuffixes, and everything in between. And so, Adolfo's work builds on the idea of what diaspora implies, the fluidity within it, the disjunctions that happen as a result of movement, and the different kinds of intersections and change of course that happen as a result of movement. So, and then for Adolfo, he engages with Black global music, not just because it is a kind of music that occurs in the diaspora, but Adolfo draws on the connection between African immigrants who moved from different parts of the homeland to United Kingdom, specifically in London. And because of what the movement of a lot of Caribbeans from the Caribbean island to United Kingdom, there are a lot of Jamaicans in United Kingdom who also identify as Black. And as a result, there is a meshing and crossing of cultures of Africa that intersect within the diasporic context. So Adolfo explores the process of defining a movement around Black music and argues against the monolithic perspective of Blackness. And so, in his work, he pushes back against ideas that construct Blackness as an identity, cultural expression that occurs only on the continent or on specific only in specific spaces and genres of literary works outside of the continent. For Adolfo, Blackness and the ideologies of movements are very linked together because the different kinds of movements that occurs and shape the perception of what the Black people outside of the continent perceive of themselves informed how Africans in the diaspora relate to Africa as their roots, as the homeland, and in fact, construct the Caribbean as a scepter of colonial past. So there is no way we would think about the works, the artistic work of the Caribbean in the United Kingdom without also looking at the plantain and the plantation slavery that moved a lot of Black people to the plantation, and how this also caused some kind of forceful movement, not just from the homeland, but across several regions of the world. Regardless of this, there is one thing that continues to identify the Blacks, and it is the identity of Blackness as tied to their roots, which is Africa. So Africa as a continent is it looms really large when we think about global Black music. So movement is intrinsic to music, and in fact the pop artists under the Afro swing umbrella, which we are going to talk more, are the mirrors of this kind of movement and what music implies within that context. So, Adolfo did a very good job helping us see the different kinds of suffixes that are attached to Afrobeats with the S. So we've talked about Afrobeat without the S and Afrobeats with the S. So the Afrobeats with the S are the offshoots of different kinds of music that came out of Afrobeat without the S. And one thing that differentiates both of them is the political underpinnings of Afrobeat and how it is traceable to Fela Anikulapo Kuti's music in the late 1950s and early 1960s until he passed on. And the Afrobeat, however, does not necessarily remove the political impact of music largely, but politics is not the overall goal, the overall aim of Afrobeat. It is about social identity, social connection, Black modernism, and all of the in betweens. And so in Adolfo's work, he came up with other subcategories of Afrobeats, and these include what he names Afro bashment, Afro swing, Afro pop, Afro bean, and Afro trap. But I will put Afro swing and Afro pop and Afro bashment, three of them together, in almost the same category, with Afro swing having a hint of jack swing, African American song, and R&B, whereas Afro bashment specifically infuses the Afro Caribbean and Jamaican identities in their rap music and in all forms of music that are produced by this group of artists. And so you see the fusion of Pidgin English, Standard English, Jamaican patois, and all of those rhetorics of Black identities within it. And so um, Afro trap does not necessarily imply what Afro swing does, but instead it blends the energetic rhythms of sub-Saharan African music and with the sound and production styles, and all of these come together as styles for Southern US trap music. So within all of these subcategories, there are some linkages across all of them. However, each of them also has a little bit of difference, but Afro swing seems like a bigger umbrella that is able to house all other forms of suffixes of Afrobeats. And so, in Adolfo's work, we also see his argument about label, and he wants us to know that when you label anything, artistic work, cultural product, cultural expressions, it should not imply anything static. It is not a static representation, but a fluid phenomenon that continues to shift and shape itself because of the agencies of people, Africans, people who functionally engage with those names, and they recreate diverse kinds of expressions through music by their engagement with such label. So label is not always static. It continues to change. And so, for example, Brixton is called the Little Jamaican of London because of the community of Jamaicans there. And then we see how song and music allows for radical self actualization. And so the fusion of African and Jamaican culture represented in, for example, Sneakbo's music, Afro swing, and all of these are core rhetoric of Black movement and presence in the diaspora. And within this kind of movement, we see the different kinds of collaboration and how this collaboration brings to the center Blackness, not just African. And so it is interesting to see the trace of the movement of African identity as it is shaped into a different rhetoric of Blackness. Blackness in the West or across different diasporic contexts comes with a lot of insinuation, the baggages that comes with it, and how the Black voice and body, and in fact, music are used as tools of, you know, pointing us back to specific history of African movement, what brought Africans where they are, their engagement with that space, and what that space continues to imply for the Black rhetoric. And so, beyond this, a lot of African immigrants whose roots are tied to the homeland have also engaged the diasporic space. For example, Naira Marley's Marijuana is one of the music that helps us see how accent, language are ways of bringing in the rhetorics of African identity, African practice, and in fact, African ownership of the self within a space that defines Africans as Black. And so within this space, there is that reconstruction of African hybridity. So in the work you're going to do, we are going to delve deep into questions of hybridity, what this implies for African authenticity, and what this implies for the complexity of the interactions of African immigrants and Africans in diaspora, and how the Black identification imbricates that. So I need you to go into all of the ideas that are shared on Canvas and explore those questions. And you're going to watch some of the sample music. I'm going to add those links to it. So you're going to use that as a way to engage with in-depth analysis of the course material. Happy learning!